Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of Sad Times. My name is Kevin. I am your host. Now, for those of you who were asking, and I know none of you were, why am I named Kevin? Well, where I went to a prestigious university in the southern part of Illinois. I'm not going to name it. And in my English class, as a freshman, we did a paper called, well, not called, it was write a paper about why you're named what you're named. Again, I said prestigious university. And so I called my mom and I said, hey, Mom, we're writing a paper and, we just want to know, why am I named Kevin? And, was there a story behind it? And she just said, it sounded good with Kelly. And I said, great. Well, good talking to you, Mom. I'll talk to you later. And so that was the whole of my paper, and my name is Kevin. And for those of you who have not listened to Sad Times before, just a little primer for you. Here we bring on people who come on to tell parts of their story. I mean, when we say their story, I mean parts of their life that they want to share when they were sad, upset, angry, emotional in any number of ways, how they acted, how the people around them that they loved and loved them acted. And the goal here is not to solve anything or fix anything. It's about letting people say, hey, this is my experience with X, Y, and Z, so that other people who are listening can hopefully feel less alone because they can say, oh, wow, I thought I was the only one who thought that, et cetera, et cetera. And before we go any further, a word from our sponsor, Fuck. And that was the word from Fuck Cigarettes. So that laugh you hear there, we're going to get him in here in just a second. He is a returning champion. He was the original guest of Sad Times way the fuck back when. And we're bringing him back on here to catch up with him. I will say this before we get started, just a disclaimer, myself, Brent, the guest, Chris, who we're going to talk to in a second, none of us, much like my sister, are doctors. None of us are doctors. So we need to just put that out there. We're going to tell some kind of experiences with medication. These are our own singular experiences. And we're not trying to tell anybody what or how or medication to do. So just want to get that out of the way. So with that being said, Chris, how are you, man?
Hey, and would you like to know how I became named Chris?
Fuck yeah, man. Did you not have to write that paper too?
I did not have to write that paper, but I can tell you that my older brother, when my mom was having him back in Harlan County, Kentucky, back in the late 60s, she was going to name him Christopher Dale. And some of the nurses and the people at the hospital were making fun of it.
What?
They were like, oh, CD, old CD.
Really?
And, yeah, they were making jokes about the name Christopher Dale. They found it funny for whatever reasons. And my mother kind of got shy about it and weirded out. And so she named him Jeffrey Allen, which is his name. But then she said to herself, well, if I have another son, well, by God, I'm going to name him Christopher Dale.
And your brother, your older brother, went on to form a chain of furniture stores, Jeffrey Allen's.
Right.
So I guess she was just embarrassed in the moment, but then you're what, a couple years younger than your brother, maybe?
Almost 4.
Almost 4? Okay. So she was like, by then she's like, fuck it, Christopher Dale, CD it is.
CD.
Man, I got to start calling you that.
But yeah.
So we'll do, again, for any of the real hardcore fans, you may have heard some of this stuff in the first episode, but we've known each other, we're coming up on over 21 years now. We've become extremely close friends, and we met each other when we were both at that prestigious university. Now, you're a bit older than I am.
Right.
And why was it that you were at the university a little later than when I was there for the quote normal
almost
time?
Almost 10 years. I graduated high school in 90, started going to the University of Illinois at that time in the fall of 90, and stayed there for a couple of years. And it was just mostly kind of funds, kind of money situation. And so I decided that, GI Bill looks pretty good. I joined the Air Force, and I spent 6 years in the Air Force. And then when I got out in 2000, I came back and started using that good old GI Bill to go to the prestigious university where we met.
That is in the southern part of Illinois.
Right.
Right.
I'm almost 10 years older than you.
Yes, that's right. So we met at that university, but it was during your sophomore year and my sophomore year.
Right.
Yes.
So at Illinois, I had taken mostly of the general ed classes. So when I got to the prestigious university, it was mostly just the concentration courses that I was taking.
And what was your original major when you started there?
At Illinois?
At the prestigious university.
I was originally, the whole time I was in the Air Force, I was thinking I was going to go to journalism school.
Okay.
And so I did that. And so I started out at where we met in the journalism school there and worked on the paper there. And it was in the same building as the theater department.
Yes,
and the
it was.
radio
just
and
down the
TV
hall.
and film and all that.
Communications building.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of found myself kind of going more towards that end of the building and thinking about some other times in my life where I was looking at maybe auditioning just out of the blue. I didn't have any.
How old were you when you first thought about that? When you say other times in your life?
I remember distinctly one time we were living at Fort Meade, Maryland. I was in the Air Force. I was attached to the NSA at that time. I was a Korean linguist. And
what does that mean? Can you just tell us like a 2-sentence primer on what a Korean linguist does?
I would listen to target communications or intercept emails or fax. When I was in Korea, I would listen to North Korean military comms.
Wow.
And provide translation or just kind of monitor what they were doing. And then at the NSA, my target was mostly just translating documents.
Okay. So you were fluent in the Korean language?
At that time.
Yes.
You don't use it, you lose it kind of thing. And so my Korean language skills aren't what they once were. But
And then what was your, did you have a major at the U of I?
Sociology.
Okay, so we've got sociology, we've got journalism, and now we're kind of hinting at maybe a foray into theater.
Yeah.
So in my experience, I went to college because that's what you did. It's like, okay, you're done with high school, you go to college, right?
Right.
And I had one major, it was film, and then like you, similarly, I auditioned for the theater department. I got in, blah, blah, blah. I briefly, for like 1 week, was a film and theater double major, and I about died. So my question for you is, has that always been kind of the case for you where you're like, you have an interest in a number of different things and maybe you kind of jump from interest to interest? Is that similar to other places in your life, I guess I should say?
Absolutely, yeah. I think, well, I started out, a very small town, rural, kind of Southern Illinois town. It was very Wonder Yearsy type kind of going on at that time. The coal mines were still going on, so there was some economic stuff happening. There was a downtown that was active, and
there's a middle class.
Yeah, it was a small rural town, so it was simple upbringing kind of thing. But the schools, were pretty basic. This is in the mid and late 70s, and there weren't a lot of quote gifted programs. But I had already, I could read already. Just messing with my brother was in school, and I was always kind of.
Wait, how old were you when you could read?
Before kindergarten.
Jesus.
I didn't really understand all that I was reading, but I could understand the sounds of letters and put them together as words and read.
Just from kind of looking over your brother's shoulder?
And asking him stuff. And then, letter people and then like the shows that were on PBS. But so I was able to do a lot academically from the very beginning. And, everything was very easy. I seemed to learn things very easily. They come to me very quickly and without much effort. And so that would kind of lead to, this is very interesting. And then just kind of dive in on it. And then interest be kind of taken in another direction. And that's always kind of the way it was. And then so I ended up going to a residential high school that was for gifted students.
Residential high school, like you moved away from home.
School, yeah.
You lived at school. Okay.
Yeah, it was.
How far away from home were you?
It was in Aurora,
Illinois,
and I'm
was
from
Wayne
Harrisburg,
there?
Illinois. No, But it's called, well, I can say it, I guess. It's Illinois Math and Science Academy.
Yes, and when people I know who, this is not me trying to be funny, the rest of the show is, but this is me. People, I know so many people, and they're like, well, I went to IMSA, and I'm like, okay, you're brilliant. You know, or I hear them, like I had a cousin who went to IMSA, that type of thing.
Right.
I have a question about what you were saying, though, about you get interest in something. Do you have the experience that if you're like really interested in, let's just say, baseball, you and I love baseball.
Right.
And I know that has not waned for you, nor is it for me. But when you first got into it, it was like, well, this is what I'm going to be interested in, and this is what I'm going to care about. I'm going to learn everything I can about this, and I'm going to acquire, quote, the materials. Is it that, and does it kind of get you every time like this is going to be the thing, and then it kind of wanes off, or do you kind of expect it to wane off?
I think at this point, you know, I'm 50, and so for a long time, I can kind of I'll see it as something that, yes, I'm interested in now. I understand that I'm interested in this, but I'm not seeing it as something that's going to go forward as some kind of, like sometimes people, I think, they would discover a love of woodworking and then push that into a career path or a life's work. Or the first time that they used pencil and paper to draw something, and they're like, oh my God, this is really making me on. And so that becomes their life's work. I didn't really have that. I would find things interesting. I would pursue it for a certain amount of time, and then not so much.
Would you kind of beat yourself up when you started to look at other things?
No, because
that's good.
I think that goes to the manic kind of situation where if I, you know, would much later be told that I had bipolar 2 disorder. So at the time that made sense to me because that kind of gave an explanation as to why I was constantly starting things and then not finishing them, not just areas of interest, but also like I didn't graduate from IMSA. I didn't graduate from the University of Illinois. It wasn't until I joined the military and got through basic training and I'm like, I finished this thing. I can do this.
That'd be an amazing feeling.
Yeah. And I can just
especially
continue
something
on.
That difficult.
And then went through that whole term of enlistment. And I was always going to get out. The military wasn't a career path for me. It was a way of, you know, being able to
you signed up for 6 years.
6 years. Yeah. Because of the linguist thing.
Right.
If I signed up for 6 years because of that, the needs of the Air Force, they needed linguists. So I was able to, you know, get some extra rank right out of basic. I got a little bonus. I got foreign language pay.
I have a good friend from childhood who was a Mandarin linguist.
Wow, nice.
So you come out of there. Now, as a kid, were you anxious?
I didn't know it at the time, I guess. I was kind of like one of those, what are they called? Katamari balls. You ever see the game where there's like a ball that just kind of travels down a mountain and it just like things attached to it. And so by the time it's down at the end, it just has all manner of like cars and people and animals. And like attached to it as it's rolling around. And I felt a little bit like that. Like I was just hurtling through space and life and just whatever kind of came on at the moment. And I was like, oh, this is heat.
And it didn't overwhelm you?
No, because, you know, again, we were kind of in a shelter, I'd say sheltered, you know, I mean, coming home at dusk when parents, you know, didn't really, it wasn't like today where there's like a monitoring of kids. You know, in summertime especially, you know, as soon as before noon, you'd be like, okay, well, I'm leaving. Yeah, we'll be home by dark. And just do whatever. And it was relatively safe in our little town. And so we would just go. And
so nothing really to be afraid of.
No, not really.
You could even imagine.
No, and nothing in school would cause me to be anxious because I could do everything pretty well.
Did you have racing thoughts of any kind? Or did somebody who is as intelligent as you, did you like overthink stuff, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I don't know because I came from some I don't know what to say, but humble beginnings. I mean, we didn't have a lot.
Yeah.
And so, but because I was interested in a lot of different things, I found myself, you know, I had early growth spurts, so I was interested in basketball and other sports. And so I found myself with the sports guys, and I was good at all the academic stuff. So I was kind of in the nerdy clique, if you want to call it that. I was kind of out. That was part of, I guess, any kind of way of dealing with any kind of anxiety or manic thing would be very outgoing, very gregarious, and very
you kind of
extroverted.
One, you're a tall motherfucker. I just want to point that out. Two, you still to this day, you come into a room and people are like, "Who's that guy?" And you kind of draw people to you. You have a magnetic sense of you. And when I met you, it was like a, and then started invited you to parties. You would just kind of hold court, that type of thing. So you're saying basically as a kid, it was like, oh, hey man, how are you doing? Hey,
right.
Hey.
That kind of, if we remember back in some of those theater classes that people would be like, you paid money to do that? Like where you talk about energy and chest and open eyes and open chest and
I do remember.
And how you send out your energy.
Your chi.
Yeah. And so I kind of, now I would look back and kind of think I was probably always kind of just very outward, kind of always just kind of an open energy type person. So I was with the popular kids. I was, I knew it. Well, it was a small school, so it was, but I just found myself traveling easily amongst the groups instead of being sequestered in one social.
You weren't in one clique.
Right.
You kind of moved between them. And then so you went to the military, jumping back up ahead a little bit here, and you then got out of the military. We met at that prestigious university.
Yeah.
What did you do after you graduated? You did graduate from that prestigious university. I do know that because you sat next to me at graduation.
I did.
Yes.
My wife was able to get a teaching position here in Chicago. The idea was to move to Chicago so I could pursue the lucrative
is right.
And world of live theater.
You and I are both wearing gold-plated headphones. That's just from our theater money.
Right. Yeah. And that happened at first. Actually at first, in the first year, I was in maybe 2 shows. And I was
Was Merry Wives one of those?
Merry Wives of Windsor, yeah.
Dracula or something?
No, it was Merry Wives of Windsor was the first one. And then, I can't remember actually because it's been a bit. But just to say that I wrote to one of my old professors and lamented that I'd only, I've been here a year and I've only been in 2 shows.
And what did they say?
And his response was, "You've only been there a year and you've already been in 2 shows?"
Yeah, that's a pretty good response.
So I was like, oh, well, maybe that's how it is.
Okay. Pause. Sorry. I can't hear anything. So yeah, 2 shows in 1 year.
Yeah. And then so, that put me in a different mindset. I was like, oh, okay, that's how it is. And then I just kept auditioning and would be doing these small storefront shows with people and getting to know people and starting to be kind of more involved in the theater community.
What was the name of the ball you said again? Where you're rolling downhill? What is that?
Katamari.
Yeah. So you were a Katamari ball now in the Chicago theater community.
Yeah.
So you're just kind of collecting friendships,
just doing one thing after the next.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's probably part of the problem too, because I didn't really have any set destination. There wasn't a long-term place that I had my eye on that I was trying to get to. I was just whatever's in front of me now, I want to do the next thing and the next thing. And at the time I had a belief that if I did the next thing and the next thing, then at some point a door would open or some opportunity would present itself and I would be ready for it.
So this is a section of the show I like to call the funny question. And it goes like this. Were you able to make your living on theater?
Not at all. It cost me money every time I did a show.
And I would expand on that just very briefly. Why it cost you money?
Well, because most of the time there was no pay.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would either have to take CTA trains, which cost money, or drive my car, which cost money, and parking and gasoline and
right.
stuff like that. Or at the time I had a little second job. I was doing temp work through a temp agency during the days, and then I also had a little restaurant job where I was kind of delivering pizzas.
Yeah.
When I first moved here, and I would have to give up some of those night shifts to
go to rehearsal.
To go to rehearse something where I was making no money.
Right. So thank you, everybody. That has been the funny question section of Sad Times, brought to you by Fuck Cigarettes. So you're in Chicago, you've done 2 shows, you find out, actually, in the first year, you find out, actually, that's pretty darn good, especially in a city of this size with a theater community this large. And you continue to do theater for a while, a good long while, actually. And then, you moved here in 2004, right?
Yes, 2004. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So how long would you say you were doing theater somewhat regularly?
Oh, about a good decade or more.
Mm-hmm.
And then it started kind of not, the opportunities weren't quite as much going into probably 2015, 2016.
Around that time, were you feeling, and I'm not trying to correlate this, maybe I am, were you feeling more stress in your life, or?
I started to feel like maybe there was some kind of window that was closing, and that was driving some anxiety because I had went to these other places, IMSA and whatnot, and some of those people that I had known from there that I still know through Facebook or whatever, they're all, very successful people by and large. And, I would always, as people do, you compare yourself. And I always just felt okay in the sense that, well, I'm an artist and I'm following this other path, and it's a high risk, high reward situation. And if the thing happens, then it's going to be really great. But if it doesn't, then okay, I'll do something else.
At that time, how were you defining success, do you think? Because you said that the people you went to school with, they've done some crazy ass things, like really cool stuff.
Right.
So were you measuring yourself against them, or did you have a different barometer that you were going off of what you would then say, I am now successful in my own eyes?
Usually in my life, and I don't know if this is for everybody, but I would compare myself to those in my contemporaries, my people in my immediate sphere, like I was a linguist, but I was a Korean linguist, and that had a little more cachet because it's a much more difficult.
It's like level 5, right? The highest level?
What the government calls a level 5, like in terms of, 1 to 5 categories, in terms of difficulty for an English speaker to learn. Korean and Arabic were the hardest. They had the longest courses at Defense Language Institute where we studied. And, the Korean linguists were like the top 3% of the enlisted kind of corps.
Okay.
Just automatically because there were so few. And then I went to like the Worldwide Language Olympics at DLI while I was in Maryland.
You went to the Worldwide
Language Olympics.
Really?
Well, it was a military thing, but yeah, it was military people from all over the world coming
Discus?
back to. No.
Oh.
I played Jeopardy in Korean for one of the things.
Really?
Yeah.
Sorry,
and actually Michael
yelling.
Jordan was one of the answers.
I love Michael. You mean, I know what it was. The answer was the greatest professional athlete to ever live. And you're like, bang, who is Michael Jordan?
Right.
Because
exactly
everybody
right.
knows that.
Exactly right.
So when you
there would be these things where like, well, I'm a linguist, but I'm at the top. And then at IMSA was, you're already considered, like everybody that's going to school there is considered to be in the top, whatever percentage of high schoolers.
Do you feel that you ever felt the same version of that in the theater community?
I felt like, especially like there was some around the 2010 and a few years after that, where I would meet some people or be cast in a show where some of the people in the show knew me by reputation and not just, I'd never met them, but they knew who I was.
Okay.
And that made me feel a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And I did feel like I never in my life until, well, and we'll get to that certainly, but up until about a year or two ago, I never had a problem with self-worth or confidence or how I felt about myself. I mean, I think a lot of artists will always go back and forth like we are and are the shit. We are shit, but we are the shit at the same time.
We used to say that to each other at Denny's
yeah, right.
long
right.
ago. And then we shit Because we were at Denny's.
Right. But in general, I always had a certain idea about who I was and how I felt about myself.
Well, don't get so goddamn far ahead of me. Just kidding. Okay, so year 2015, 2016, I want to go back to this idea of the window closing because I think that's something that everyone can relate to. I certainly can relate to it. I almost made a bad joke. Okay, so you said that caused anxiety. Did you think that there was some sort of clock that was ticking saying, if I don't get X by this age, maybe, or I haven't reached X goal by this age, then that, as you said earlier, that door that's going to open is going to close. Is that kind of what you were going through, or am I saying that wrong?
Well, yeah. No, that's right. And that I felt like time was running out for me, and that the longer I stayed at because by that time I had been temping at this accounting firm, and then got on as a permanent employee. And then suddenly what I had always considered my day job, and I still referred to it as my day job for years, is going to be suddenly just my job. I'm no longer this person. I'm a tax processor at an accounting firm. And that caused me a good bit of anxiety as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's time for the Dr. Phil question of the day, brought to you by Fuck Cigarettes. But how did that make you feel? And you answered me. It made you anxious.
Yeah.
Because you're like, no, correct me if I'm wrong and I'm saying this. Were you kind of thinking, well, this job is here just because I can't make the money right now in theater, but I will get to that open door. I will walk through that door. I will then be at the point where I can make money doing what I studied, what I love to do. And then this, quote, day job will no longer be needed.
Right.
Is that fair?
Yeah. And then even during the day job time, there were points and perhaps opportunities that, because of, upbringing and work ethic and got to have a job and got to make money, there were some things that were a play or maybe an independent film or something that I could have done, but it took place during the day. And so at the time I was like, well, I can't quit my job. But my wife was making decent money, so we could have probably gotten by while I pursued these opportunities, but I didn't. And I kept my job instead and just kept doing non-union storefront theater at night. And so over time that became a source of anxiety. Like, why didn't I do that?
So you're revisiting those decisions.
Right. I'm starting to revisit a lot of decisions.
You say work ethic because, yes, you're one of the hardest working people. I know you come from a family of extremely hardworking people. It just was like, well, you don't walk away from a good job. Is that kind of what you're saying? Right.
Or the security of it, even big theater companies, the Steppenwolfs and the Goodmans and the Chicago Shakes of the world. My day job was paying more per week than what those things would pay. And then after the production's over, well, you're out of work until you find another one. And so this steady paycheck every 2 weeks, I felt like
risk reward.
Right. I didn't Thelma and Louise it. I didn't drive off the cliff.
Nice Ridley Scott reference.
I didn't take the leap.
They definitely. Oh, spoiler alert. So you're starting to question these decisions, et cetera. Now, around this time, you and I, we were still talking most days. And you mentioned Steppenwolf. Now, that's a theater company. Now, there's the band Steppenwolf.
Right.
That has a song that says, God damn the Pusher Man.
Uh-huh.
Which is a great song. And around this time, I kept saying, well, you seem more... Well, let me do my impression of me. Well, you seem more... No, that's Dr. Jason. I was just like, you seem more anxious. You know what? I've been on medication for a long fucking time. You should try it. And you're like, well, I don't know about that. And I kept kind of pushing you towards it. Not like forcing you, but saying this might help.
Right.
And so when did you start taking Zoloft?
Let's see. It was well before the pandemic. So 2018.
Were you a happy little egg?
I'm sorry?
You remember those Zoloft commercials from forever ago? It's just like a crudely drawn egg who's just really happy. Every day when I would take Zoloft and just feel myself becoming more and more of a zombie, I was like, well, at least I'm an egg.
No, and I resisted taking any sort of medications.
You did. Mm-hmm.
Because I was like, well, what if it takes away my artistic sensibilities? Like what if it, whatever I have going on inside me that makes me this person is changed inexorably.
I hear that, and I think a lot of people listening to this will hear that 1,000%. I've been on and off medication, but mainly on medication since June 23rd of 2000, and I for a long time was on such a low dose that it really wasn't doing much of anything. Right. Because I was so afraid that this part that makes me crazy is also the part that does the stuff, So I totally hear you on that. But did you go to a psychologist, psychiatrist, or how did you get prescribed?
Well, I just went to my primary care physician and described what I was feeling. And I wasn't sure whether because we're on an HMO, so if I was going to go to a psychiatrist, I'd still have to go to my primary care first and get a referral. So I went to my primary care physician, and she's my primary care physician, but she wasn't an MD. She was a PhD with like a practitioner kind of thing. She was legally allowed to be my doctor and prescribe me medicines, but she wasn't an MD.
All joking aside, my sister is not a doctor. But also, all joking aside, a lot of great providers are also nurse practitioners.
Sure.
Yeah. So,
sure. I'm just saying for my primary care physician was not
like a family doctor.
Not like an MD, right?
Yeah, had a little black bag and
well, I don't know. Yeah. But so I described how I'd been feeling, and at that time I was.
Do you recall what you said?
No.
Or the idea of how you were feeling? Can you describe that?
I'd been drinking a lot, and I had for years, kind of, and I just thought, well, I'm just I'm a drinker. I like it. But as the time goes on, you kind of see how you're using it for certain things, and not just to have a good time, but to also
self-medicate, maybe.
Correct. Yeah, I think so. I think there was some of that. And so I was getting up to 3 times. It was just on the weekends, but then more and more. And so I told her that. I was kind of worried, not worried, but I'd been drinking a lot more, and I'd kind of. There's a great part in Cat on Hot Tin Roof where Brick. Why do you drink? Why do you drink? And he talks about he drinks until he hears this click in his head, and it turns the hot light off and the cool light on, and everything's peaceful. And I guess that's anxiety. I guess I was trying to get rid of by doing that. But so when I went to the doctor and said, this is, how I'm feeling, she's like, well, we'll start you off on this amount of Zoloft.
Do you remember how much it was? Was it 25 or something?
Yeah, I think so. It was the low dose. And then time would go on, and I didn't really feel any different. So she upped the dose, and time would go on, and didn't feel much different. Up the dose.
You still weren't feeling changes?
Not really. I mean, there were changes in ways that I wasn't the biggest fan of. In terms of just very basic things like libido, was kind of crushed by it. And,
did you I made a joke earlier about when I was a happy little egg, because I took Zoloft about 20 years ago. It just didn't work for me. And one of the main things was it made me feel like I felt nothing, like I was a zombie.
Yeah.
So it's like overcorrection in a sense. So did you kind of feel that way too, or no?
Once the dosages would just kept getting raised until I was at the max that you can take. Once I started getting to those higher dosages, it did start to feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
was it worth the relief or no? In your estimation, meaning the relief, it sounds like because when I became a zombie, there was relief in a sense from some of the racing thoughts, some of the stress that caused by that. But it was like the cost benefit, it was too much of a payoff. I was not myself anymore.
right.
So did you ever feel though, like, oh, well, I feel less of X and that makes my life better? Or is it like, this isn't worth it?
It made me feel some of the anxiety less, and some of the stuff in your mind just tortures your mind less. But I wasn't feeling as if the trade-off. I was instantly rationalizing, like I was the kind of a zombie, and I would just go to work and then come home and sit in my comfy chair and watch television until I go to bed.
I'm here to tell you it is a comfy chair.
Right. And then just go to work the next day. Just a very, what I would, normal or average or proletariat. I don't know what to say, but not the artist type life that I had been living or that I thought of myself.
Yeah.
I was just kind of but there was some comfort in that too. Like I felt like I didn't have to do it. Like before, I felt like there was some pressure that if I don't, because kind of growing up, because I had some successes in certain areas.
Right.
People are like, oh, you're going to do great things. Oh, you're gonna fly high. You're going to make it. And all of a sudden I'm like, well, now I have to make it. And if I don't, then total failure. And what is it all worth?
Total failure. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Just the idea of total failure, nothing else. No, I mean, but seriously, like where you're like, well, if I don't do this, then fuck it all. I fucked everything up.
Right.
How do we get there?
I don't know. Like if I don't have if I'm not the star of a TV show, then my life is worthless. Which is, or in a movie, or famous director, whatever it is. If I didn't become some kind of successful person in that field, then what was it all for? But the heavy duty Zoloft was kind of taking a little bit of that away, and I was finding myself more kind of settling into this.
And you were accepting of it
at the time, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I do want to interject here. While Zoloft didn't work for me, and it sounds like it didn't work the best for you overall. Yeah, I know multiple people who are on Zoloft that it does great stuff for. And it kind of is the mantra of like, if you think you need medication and the first one doesn't work, that doesn't mean you could try other ones.
Right.
So it's not like we're not piling on Zoloft. The only thing we pile on this show is Brent. Because we can't stand them. But other than that, so how long were you, so you're on the highest dose of Zoloft. How long were you on that before you thought to yourself, or did you think to yourself, I need to move on from something? Or what happened? What changed?
After about 6 months of being on the highest dosage and not getting the kind of results that I thought I should be getting, I went back to my doctor and told her that. And I guess she felt like I needed something stronger because my interactions with her were, I don't know, I would get frustrated. And sometimes when I get frustrated, I get a little loud, and I don't hide my emotions very well, like in my face or anything. So she would be taking this as me like yelling at her or in a very angry, rage-filled way, kind of not attacking her, but kind of. And so she would try to talk to me about some other things. And then she left the room and came back in with like this sheet of paper and started asking me some questions.
Just one sheet of paper?
Yeah, just one sheet. And started asking me some questions. And I answered them. And then she's like, aha, well, perhaps we need to try this other medication.
Meaning, well, hold on, like stopping Zoloft totally?
Getting off Zoloft and getting on something else. Okay.
And quick question, around this time when you were about to make this change, were you still drinking a lot or no?
Not as much. The Zoloft kind of made it to where I wasn't drinking quite as much, but I was still drinking.
Okay. So.
But then I got on this other one, and she put me on.
What was it?
It was called Vraylar.
Vraylar.
And I didn't know much about it, but as soon as she put me on it, I kind of started being Dr. Internet, and started reading about it and trying to find out more. And
what did you find out about it? At least from your research.
What little bit I was looking at started to be confusing right off the bat, because everything I was reading was saying that it was for bipolar 1. And she had told me that I had bipolar 2. So then I had to go and start reading what's the difference between bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. Mm-hmm. And bipolar 2, I guess if you could say more mild. I mean, like the manic periods might not be, or the manic and the depressive periods might not be as severe, but they may last longer.
In 2 or 1?
In 2.
In 2, okay.
But obviously there was some difference because they were labeled as such, bipolar 1, bipolar 2. And in fact, now there's ads I see all the time for new medicines that tout the idea that they're for both bipolar 1 and bipolar 2.
And when you see those ads, are people like dancing in a cornfield while they're like saying this may cause death or loss of toes or whatever the fuck?
Right. Mm-hmm. And so she put me on Vraylar, and it was the lowest dosage, 15 milligrams. And
how long did it take for you to start feeling the effects of it?
I guess a few weeks.
Yeah.
But after a few weeks, strange things would be happening. Like I didn't want to drink at all, ever. No drinking, no smoking weed, no nothing.
And I just want to say this out here. The first time I heard Chris say, well, I didn't even think about drinking, I was like, what? And again, I'm not trying to mock you. I'm saying, like, Chris, you were always like, let's go have a beer. Mm-hmm. Let's have a 6-pack and watch fucking Fox News and get mad. That's how we hung out. And
one of the first nights we hung out, I drank I think a 12-pack and a pint.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. And yes, you did. So you were a drinker,
right?
Big drinker,
sure.
And all of a sudden, you're like, I don't think I want to drink anymore.
Didn't even cross my mind. And then I thought that was weird. So I started, sleuthing about that. And there was some anecdotal evidence where people that were taking this kind of drug they were using it for people that were addicts or having substance abuse problems.
Oh.
And it was helping them a lot because whatever it was doing in their brain. So at the 15 milligram level, the no drinking thing, I saw at the time as a good thing, a benefit, a bonus. And some of the anxiety or the racing thoughts would cease, which also made me very happy. But one of the other things was it kind of locked me in my own mind, and not in a racing thoughts kind of way, but just I had always been a very talkative person, easy to chat. Mm-hmm. One of those old men that sit in the fountain at the mall and just whoever sits next to him just start talking.
Did you say sit at the fountain in the mall?
Yeah, these are the olden times.
Okay, then.
These are in olden days when they had these giant buildings that you'd go in and there'd be various stores with inside.
Malls?
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, there was such
and they
place.
had fountains? Okay.
Like so in the center courtyard area.
You were that guy that always got dragged away by the police at the fountain.
Sure.
Okay, no, I'm just kidding. But but that's exactly right, Marcum. You always were the most gregarious, as you said earlier in the program. The most gregarious, the most outgoing, hey, how are you? And like you would listen to people and people are like, oh, he's listening to me, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, so you felt like that was just evaporating.
Right. And everybody noticed it. My wife, everybody in my family, other people that were close to me. I would just come home and not say anything all night.
Nothing. Other than like, could you pass me that?
Right. Or she'd ask me if I wanted something and I'd say no. Or
when you were not saying anything, can I ask you, were you cognizant that you weren't saying anything? Meaning, I haven't said anything for a while. And did that make you more anxious?
Yes.
And then you started to double back on yourself perhaps and think, why am I not saying anything? And then did that kind of start up the racing thoughts?
A little bit. But it was when, after a few weeks and things were kind of going in a good way, and I had a follow-up appointment, and she's like, how's it going? I was like, well, I'm not really drinking, and I'm not as anxiety ridden as I was, but at the same time, I'm a little zombied.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, well, it seems like perhaps you need to go up to the next dosage level. So she doubled the dosage, went from 15 to 30.
Okay.
And a few weeks into that is when things really started going far south.
What does that mean?
I was having trouble. I always felt slightly not completely sober. Like I felt like I was always my mind was always in a state where I just didn't feel normal. Like it just didn't, my thoughts were clouded. I didn't really say anything, not because I just didn't have anything to say, but because I was worried that if I did say things that I would just break down and start bawling. And
just by speaking, it made you.
Well,
you're afraid you would become emotional,
right? And the worst part, the very worst part, was all day, every day, and at night, and laying in the bed trying to go to sleep. Just a churn. Just a constant churning obsession with every decision I had ever made, every path I had ever taken. And I was absolutely convinced that I had taken the wrong decision at every opportunity. Like every decision I'd ever made was wrong. I am now in this position where it's all over for me. I can't hardly even do the job that I have, which isn't even that great of a job. I couldn't do anything. And I would start seeking out any opportunities to find something that would take my focus away from that.
So you began obsessing. You alluded to it earlier. Well, sometimes you would think about decisions in the past and say, oh, I went the wrong way there. But this became all consuming now.
Yeah.
And so it was just kind of a loop in a sense.
Yeah.
What would you, go ahead. Sorry.
No, just certain points, where when I was in the military, when I was at the NSA as an Air Force, I was a senior airman at the time, but I was getting ready to get my discharge and they had offered me a civilian position. Mm-hmm. Which, had I taken it, I certainly would be in a much different position than I am now. Mm-hmm. And so that's like one thing. I'm like, oh, why didn't I do that? Or why didn't I stay in journalism?
Would this go over days?
All day, yeah. Weeks.
What I mean by that is like you maybe on a Saturday you started to think about, I didn't take that position. Would you still be thinking about that the following Wednesday type of thing?
Yeah, because there was a list of decisions, a list of things that I had done wrong in my mind. And I would just that list would just be the same list every day.
Would you ever get any relief?
No, never.
Even if you say, forgot about, I turned down that civilian job and then thought about journalism. Was there not a relief saying, well, that civilian job, that makes sense, but this journalism, this is the problem. Or were they just were all awful?
Everything was awful.
Okay.
Every decision I would think that had I done the other thing, my life would be better.
Yeah, well,
currently is.
Everything was awful. So you've passed the audition. You can be on Sad Times. But there was no relief. The reason I asked that, just to give you a little, when I used to obsess over things as a kid, I obsessed about, I was going to die in the electric chair. And I would obsess over it and obsess over it and obsess over it. And then I would obsess over being kidnapped. And I would think about the electric chair thing and be like, well, that was dumb. At least I'm not worried about that. I mean, that's why I was saying that.
No,
so there was no relief.
There was no relief until I would find certain types of things to watch.
Like what?
Like Bulls basketball games, like or any basketball game, but sports events would be something that would kind of in the moment take my focus and allow me to just focus on that and just watch that and not be thinking about all the horrible decisions I've ever made.
But you're still not, though, being your talkative, gregarious self.
No, never. Silent, zombie, just silent and just very meek. I felt very small, like Chief in Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah.
I felt very small and there was no juicy fruit.
Damn it, you beat me to it.
And so I would just go through my days and just try to get through the day at work and just anything anybody asked me to do. Yes. Oh, yes. But outwardly, people weren't really understanding what was going on. But they didn't know that inside was just this roiling, boiling, horrible cauldron of hate and anguish. Because outwardly, they just thought that they were thinking that it was a good thing. They were thinking that I was better than I was before.
Right, because you were not so I don't want to put words in anybody, in their eyes, manic, or as you said, getting the rage on your face or whatever it was.
Like I'd get in trouble sometimes at work, the way they'd say that I was mean to someone or I spoke to them in a certain way. And this blew my mind because to me, I was just explaining something to them.
Right.
But I guess the volume of my voice and the resting murder face that I have,
which I see right now,
would cause issue. But
so you're not doing that anymore, and everybody's like, "Well, look at Chris; he's doing better."
Yeah, you seem a lot more pleasant. Oh, Chris, yeah, you feel okay? Yeah, you seem to be a lot better.
But just constant self-flagellation.
But in my mind, it was just that.
Did you try to explain that to anybody?
No, because I was having trouble really describing anything. I couldn't even really describe it to Samantha all that well, my wife. I was just suffering. And one time I came on I watched the first episode of the Mary Tyler Moore Show.
Great show.
Great show. And I found that I could, when I watched it, I wasn't thinking about all the other horrible things in my life. So I obsessively watched it. Like everywhere I was, I would watch it. I would get to work early and watch a couple episodes and then make it till lunchtime so I could watch a couple more episodes and then get home at night and watch hours worth. I went through every single episode.
All 7 seasons?
Yeah, within a fairly short amount, just a few weeks' time.
Because like basketball, you could watch that. I know you are a great lover of sitcoms.
Yeah.
And you're a great lover of the sitcom trope, and you're wrongly a great lover of the laugh track. But you could get lost in the rhythm, maybe, is a way to say it, of that, and then say, oh, see, you could see how you were like breaking it down and saying, this is how this works, and this is why I like this character.
Right, and it wasn't that the A plot of this episode was so captivating that it took me away. It was that I had watched so much television in my life, and this was such a classic one, and it was so well constructed and well put together, and I love these characters, and so like, oh, he's going to do a bit. Yeah. Oh, here comes Ted. He's going to do something.
Huge shout out, by the way, to the Mary Tyler Moore Show because it's fucking great.
Yeah, you should definitely watch it if you haven't.
So you're doing that. How long into being on the drug are you at this point where you're relying on classic sitcoms?
Right, in sports. I would say I got on the 30 milligrams before Christmas, and it was almost the end of February when I just wanted to give up on. I just wanted to not be feeling that way anymore. I didn't want to take that medicine anymore.
Before Christmas of 2021? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So you were on it.
I was on the higher 30 milligrams. I was on for maybe 3 months, 3.5 months.
How long after you started feeling this way and having the obsessive thoughts and revisiting every single decision, like why did I become friends with Kevin, things like that, that did you go back? Shut up, Brent. Did you go back to the doctor, your primary care provider, and go, this is terrible. This is doing X, Y, and Z to me.
Right. I did do that.
How long after you started feeling that way did you go talk to your doctor?
It was a couple months.
Well, I know you were on it. So the reason I asked that is I know you have to wean off of these drugs.
Right.
How long did you wean off of it?
I was taking 30 milligrams.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had to take half of that amount for some weeks and then a smaller amount still. So it was probably about 6 weeks altogether until I was taking none.
Yeah.
And then with that kind of medicine, it's some more time needed to pass
to get it out of
to completely not be in my system.
Mm-hmm.
But then some other things that I had read or whatever, not from my doctor or any other. I do have a friend that is a psychiatrist, and I kind of just off the record, off the books, kind of just asked their advice and asked, well, what would you do, or what can I say? And she's like, well, you're not my patient, and blah blah blah, all the caveats.
Mm-hmm.
But there was the idea that your brain will rewire itself; it will revert back to how it was before you started taking this.
How terrified were you that was not going to happen?
Very. To the point where it's almost a year now that I've not taken it, and I still feel like something is not ever going to be the same. Like I am irrevocably changed.
Do you mean that you still feel that cloudiness that you said?
I don't feel what may have been, I don't know if it was just manic episodes that just were, because with bipolar 2, I guess if I have it, I didn't ever go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, or I don't know who is best to diagnose that kind of thing. But I don't think that it's just my primary care physician off of a drug rep's sales sheet.
What do you mean? Is that
I think that's what that questionnaire was.
Oh.
That she originally diagnosed me. Like she diagnosed within like 5 seconds. Like here's this sheet of paper that's got 5 questions written on it with the drug company's logo on it. And according to the answers to those 5 questions, instantly you have bipolar 2. You should take this drug.
While taking the drug, did you ever think I should speak to somebody at the same time?
I don't think so.
No.
Or if I did, curious. I didn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
I just was like, well, my doctor says this is what I should be taking, so I guess I'm going to take it. But then after some months of just mental anguish, torture, and suffering, I couldn't sleep. I could barely work. It was really affecting my marriage. Not in a, like she was going to leave me, but
she was worried about you.
Very.
Mm-hmm.
And
because when you stop talking, and I'm not trying to be funny, like that's not you. That's not you.
Right. And people would want to call me, like old friends would want to call me and catch up, and I couldn't really hold conversation.
You and I didn't even have, we would have calls, but they would be short, and you sounded, I think the word I'll use is defeated.
Yeah. Where I just didn't have much to offer the conversation.
And I could tell that you were, knowing you as well as I do, that you were consumed with the fear that you were not doing what you once did.
Yeah. And the idea that, one of the things that I thought of myself was, in any conversation, I can always find the joke or do a play on words with whatever somebody said, or, the kind of like what you hear with a lot of, podcast groups.
Mm-hmm.
There's some dudes sitting around a table and just talking about a subject, but then riffing on
they do the riff
the subject, and riffing on building off of what this guy said and making a joke, and then that guy says a joke that's based on what that was, that kind of thing.
And you felt that was gone, or you were worried that was gone.
That was something that I was never going to be able to do again. I wasn't near my sense of humor, which I had always kind of leaned on and had some validation about from various people at various times. I felt like maybe it had been burned out of my brain by this medicine.
It's a terrifying thought to think of a sense of humor going away.
Yeah, it was terrible.
Just look at me, and then think about me without a sense of humor, and you get Brent.
But I started listening to just sitcom, like comedy channels on Sirius. There's like 6 different ones.
Do you mean like stand up?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And and then go through the Netflix stand-up specials and I just started watching a lot of stand-up, just trying to even.
Were you trying to sharpen your sense of humor again?
Or to see if I even recognized it, like if I even found what they were saying funny. Mm-hmm. Or if it was funny and I didn't laugh or whatever, if I didn't react to it, what does that say? Or that's a pretty well crafted joke. I wonder if that sounds like something I would have said. You know, what he's doing now is something that I used to do, I think. Or that's what I would think.
Are you still doing this?
No, not nearly as much.
I mean, you remain to me one of my North Stars, one of my artistic heroes. I call you, you're one of my original reading heroes. You have introduced me to so many things artistically, culturally in my life that have made my life exponentially better. And I, for one, don't feel that any of that is gone. But I can understand the all-consuming fear that I'll just speak as myself, like my identity is now gone.
Right.
And that is fucking frightening.
It totally is.
So you're almost a year off it.
Right.
And you feel you are back to normal?
I don't know. I still have the fear that I will never be exactly who I was before I went down this medicine journey for my mental health. Mm-hmm. I don't know that I will ever really feel. And maybe that's not true. Maybe something's going to happen like in the near future or in the far future. I don't know. But currently today, as we sit here, I still feel like Superman that went into the chamber.
Damn it.
And came out with no powers.
I was really hoping we could get out without the Superman reference, but all right.
No, there will be a Superman reference.
Yeah, there always fucking will be. Raylar or no.
Orson hasn't shown up yet, so.
That's true. Well, now he has.
All right. Might bust out some Orson quotes.
Well, and again, I want to reiterate, just because this didn't work for you does not mean it's not a valuable medication that works for people.
Everybody's totally different, and what works for one person might not work for the other, vice versa. Yeah.
But
these are pills that are on the market for a reason.
I have to imagine
it just didn't help me.
You're right. One way or another, I've had an experience similar to this, although I don't know if it was as extreme as this. One way or another, I think a lot of people who do struggle with mental health are prescribed medications that maybe aren't the best for them, and they feel like they're doing something wrong or that they fucked up, or they're scared to death about it, but they're like, but these are the drugs. This is what's supposed to be happening. And so I appreciate that you came on today and were able to be so forthright about that and say, I was scared to death of these things.
Right.
And kudos to you for saying, you know what? I'm going to make the decision. My life has become something that I was not expecting, something I don't recognize. I'm going to make the decision to try to move on from this, right? And I think that's not an easy thing to do either.
Right. Well, I appreciate that. And I just appreciate you having me on and to be able to talk about it. I think the more I have kind of talked about it and trying to articulate outwardly what's been going on inwardly has been a big benefit.
Well, that's good. And I'm glad that this was a benefit. And I look forward to a couple years from now when some other horrible shit has happened. We can have you back on and we can all process it.
Right.
But seriously, is there anything else that you wanted to impart or say before we kind of wrap up?
Not really. I just think that mental health is a very important issue. And I think that a lot of times companies or people's employers, they give the lip service to it, or they'll send out emails checking in on your well-being or check your vitals.
Checking in on your well-being.
Right. Or they'll say that there's some resources available. But then when you go to avail yourself of these resources, they don't seem to be. Or they'll say that they're very concerned. But then when you tell them, well, I have this and I need some accommodations because of this, they suddenly don't seem to be as interested. But
yeah.
But so if someone's,
It's almost as if we say we're having a conversation about mental health, but we're not really having a conversation about it.
well, at least in the workplace,
You're right, in the workplace. Oh, that gives me an idea.
people want to just kind of sweep it under the rug and be like, they don't want to have to deal with it. They're like, how are you doing? Well, and then you start to say, and then oh, okay, well, got a call. I got to get on.
Which, yeah, and it's, I think, it's finish what you were saying. I don't mean
just
to interrupt
that
you.
I think if folks are identifying or saying, yes, I hear you to anything that I've said, and they find themselves having difficulty even getting through the workday and doing their work, to really lean on friends and people that you trust and are close to, because no matter how much some outward group like your boss or your company or whatever, it's the people closest to you that are actually going to be the ones to get you over the hump and get you past it and get you talking again or get you out of your head.
Yeah. And I think, too, the more we have people like you come on, tell your story, that will also lead to you're in the workplace and you say, actually, this is going on. As people hear these stories more and more, they're going to be more comfortable listening to them. And it's not, at least in my experience, it's rarely that person doesn't care. It's that they're like,
Or, yeah, even be able to identify it. If somebody that you're working with you've known them always to be a certain way, and then suddenly they're acting a very different way, that might not be a good thing. That might not be something that they're happy about. Or it may outwardly appear one way, but inside that person's mind, a very different thing is happening.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and
don't be afraid to reach out and say, I noticed that you're not going out with us as much on happy hours, or you're not doing this, or you are doing this. Is everything all right?
Yeah, I can remember the smallest of kindnesses from people like 30 years ago. So even if you reach out to somebody and say, are you doing okay?
Yeah.
I think it's immeasurable for some people to hear that. And something I like to always close the show with is, one, thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing. Seriously, thank you. And two, just a reminder that I like to throw in at the end, that there's always room for kindness and grace, no matter the situation. And I think it's worth remembering that for yourself as well. I forget it every fucking day, that I could be a little nicer to myself, or maybe allow myself a little more grace, not, as you said earlier, total failure. So hearing stories like yours, I know that there are people out there who are listening who have struggled with the same thing. And I hope it helps you feel less alone, because I think the less alone we all feel, the more we'll be willing to open up. So thank you again for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. And we will see you next time on Sad Times.
You've been listening to A Fourth Hand Joint.